I do not really have a set of slides to go with what it is that we are going to do today. As I mentioned a moment ago, our primary task for the next few moments is to talk about the class builder. And the transaction code for the class builder is S24. And what the class builder is it is an interface to the ABAP dictionary, but specifically focused on one that allows us to define classes. So we're still working with the same ABAP dictionary that we have been using throughout the semester, but we get to it in a different fashion when we are talking about working with classes. And the idea here that I will use in our walkthrough today is something that I would suggest to you is fairly typical workflow, and workflow that I would suggest that you follow as well, is once we have a class that we have defined and tested and feel is correct, we can then at that point turn our focus towards putting it in the ABAP dictionary. I think it would be a very bad move to try to put a class into the ABAP dictionary as its first stop. I think you're much more likely to see as an effective coding practice the idea of creating it and testing it in a standalone program, and then once all of the corrections have been made, then putting those into the ABAP dictionary. So what we are going to do in the walkthrough here is move our document class to the ABAP dictionary, and then in addition to that, we looked at inheritance with the purchasing document class, and so we will make use of that as well. So we start off by launching the interface to the class builder, and we have to take care to follow our naming convention that we always use for things in the ABAP dictionary. So I am going to create an ABAP object here called Z35 underscore document. And you'll notice here I could display an object if it had already been created or change one, but this is a brand new creation, as we can tell from there being no results found. And so I will click on the create button. And then I'm asked once again what I want the name of this object to be, and I'm asked whether this is a class or an interface. We haven't really talked about interfaces in this context at this point, so you can probably guess that the correct answer here is in fact going to be class. So I will hit the check mark button, and on this screen I'm asked for a set of information here, a description. So I will just call this general system document, and it will be a public class, meaning it can be available to any program on the system. I do have a set of 4 radio buttons here to choose the type of class this is, and I love that the first radio button is just usual ABAP class, which is what this is. This is going to be a usual class, and so nothing special or different about it. Notice we do have persistent classes, test classes, and other things here, but for right now what we have been just doing is the normal usual ABAP classes. Now it's interesting to me, this check mark down here at the bottom is called final. If I designate a class as final, that means it cannot have child classes. It seems odd to me that that is checked by default, as we will want to uncheck it because we do want our document to be able to have child classes from it. So pretty much here on the second dialog, all I am doing is giving a description of my class that I'm creating, indicating that it's a usual class, and then untoggling the designation of final, and then I hit the save check mark. And we've seen this before now where I have to assign this to my development package. And ultimately I find myself at this interface right here. Different screen than we have seen before, but of the type that we have seen. Notice across the top we have properties, interfaces, friends, attributes, methods, events, types, aliases. We have buttons across the top. Many of this we will talk about over the course of the next few minutes together. Now, what I like to do is when I am doing this, and it's much easier when I do this at home or in my office where I have dual screen monitors, because then what I can do is I can put my source code on one screen and I can put my class builder on the second screen, and life becomes very, very easy. But here, where I just have one screen, I'm going to have to bounce back and forth. And what I like to do is basically just attack this in the exact same order as what I have written here in my source code. So you'll notice the very first thing that we have here is this class data called num documents that is defined as you see here. So if I go to my class builder, what we are talking about is an attribute. So I will switch to the attributes tab, and this becomes very, very easy as you get used to it, but we'll just kind of put the first one of these in and talk about it. The name of my first attribute is num documents, so I will type that in. Level, well, you might say, what is level? Well, if we do the search here, you'll see what this is. This is either, is this an instance attribute, is it a static attribute, or is it a constant? Well, we know that this is a static attribute. It's class data, so I will choose static attribute. Then I go over to visibility. Well, what does that mean? Visibility, is it public, is it protected, or is it private? Well, we know that it in fact is public, so I'll choose that. This next column that just has the checkbox in it is for read-only, and we do know in fact that it is read-only, so I will toggle that. Then I have here where the keyword type, and then what's the associated type? Well, the associated type is I, and my screen is, if I keep going over here, description, this is number of documents. And then if I scroll over to the right on my desktop screen, that I don't have to scroll, I have an initial value of 0. And in fact, that is the furthest column over to the right. So there's my num documents attribute added in. And then what I like to do is this, just to feel like I'm making progress. Then I come over here and I just delete it from my source code. Okay? So now I have doc number. So I'll come back here, and this is doc number. And the level of this is an instance attribute. The visibility here. And by the way, you're better off doing what I'm doing here and double clicking on this as opposed to typing it in, because you can get yourself in trouble with it not accepting the values. And this is read only. Now, the associated type, if we go back to our source code here, we will see that this is type n length 6. Well, if I come over here, you can see where I could type in the n, but I don't have a place to type in the length of 6. So what do? Whenever you need to specify something beyond just a very simple type here, that's what this button is for right here, for direct type entry. And so I'll click on that, and it'll ask me if I want to save what I've done so far, and the answer to that is yes. And so I find myself at code here. Class or data, document number, type n, and here's where I type this in, type n length 6. Yes, sir. It would not, because as you see, what I just did now is I save this, and I'm going to hit this green back button to go back. You'll notice that in my interface, it takes it out totally. So when I do that, no, there's no way for me to do that. I have to do it the way we're looking at here. And so you always want to get in the habit of documenting this. This is a document number. Okay, and so now I'll go back to my source code here, and so now, and I always like to, bounce back and forth like this, and this is a good way to double check as I'm going to make sure I did it right. All right, so I've got date, D, read only. So date. And here's what I say, you don't want to try and type in, so you can get yourself in trouble. If I do instance attribute, seems like it took it okay, public, so you can give it a shot if you want, but I'll just encourage you, be careful if you start doing typing it in like that. And this is date of document creation, and entered that. You will notice that even if I type these in lowercase over here, it does make them all caps once I hit enter. And then lastly, Doctype, type C, length 1. So Doctype, and this is an instance attribute, and it is public. And you notice all of these are read-only. Type C. Now I could click on this button right here and put in length 1, and it wouldn't be bad for me to do that. But remember, the default length of C is 1 anyhow, so I could just get away with putting C there. And this is the type of document code. And if I go back now to SE80, you will see that in fact all of my attributes have been put in. I didn't have any private attributes or protected attributes, so everything is in there. What I like to do at this point is come back here and save this, and then just like in our programs, we can do a validity check, and it came back and said no syntax errors found. So this is how I put in my attributes, okay? So I think it's pretty straightforward. You just work your way across the row, specifying all the things that are true for your class attributes. Next thing I have is methods, and you notice that my very first method is the constructor, which is really an interesting one to put in. So I'm going to switch to the methods tab. Now, you can probably figure out what's going on here. I'm going to put in the name of the method and some other facts for it. For whatever reason, and I don't know that I can tell you why, for the constructor, I don't type the word constructor, I hit the constructor button. So I hit the constructor button, and it puts in the constructor for me, okay? So you notice it put in constructor, instance method, public, and then for the constructor method only, I get this little like hammer and wrench thing, okay? It gets its own little special icon there, and it typed in the description for me. So I didn't type any of that in. I got that line there by hitting the constructor button here at the top. Now, if you go back here, you notice, oh, hang on a second, the constructor has parameters. How do I handle parameters? Well, in the methods screen, there's like two different levels of this. You start by putting in the name and the description of the method, and then when you're ready to put in the parameters, with that line highlighted, you hit the parameters button. And now you're taken to another screen where you put in the parameters associated with that method. And notice here we have three of them: doc number, date, and doc type. And this very much resembles what we did a moment ago with putting in attributes. So doc number, okay, and then I have a checkbox here, and this stands for, is this pass by value? And it's not pass by value. Is it optional? Well, as I look at my source code, I do in fact see that the document number is optional. So I come back here and I engage that, and the type of my document number is N, and there's no default value, and my description here of this is just a document number. So there's my first parameter, and now you notice I have date and doc type. So next parameter is date. It is not passed by value. It has a default value, so I'm going to leave optional unchecked, and let's watch what happens. It has a type of D, and the default value is sy-datum, which I can put that in there as a document, as a system constant, and then this is the creation date. Now notice what happens when I enter here. Because I put in a default value, it toggled on the optional for me, and notice I can't edit it because there's a value hanging out here in the default value screen, and default value field. And then my last attribute, Doctype, it has a very similar thing going on in that it is type of C, but the default value here is the letter A, and I have to take care to put that in single quotes, just like I did in my source code, and this is type of document. Well, if I go back to double check, I can see that in fact those are all of my elements related to my constructor. So I'm moving right along here, and I can wipe this out. So I go back to my class builder. I'm going to save this. I'm going to check this. So far, so good. Don't let these arrows over here fool you. To get back, I want to use this big back button here at the top to go back to now my list of methods. Well, we put in the constructor method. What do we have up next in our source code? Set doc number. And so I'll go back to my class builder, and I just type this in, set doc number. And it is, what are our choices here? Is it an instance method or is it a static method? And it's an instance method. And then visibility, notice my choices here, what you would expect, public, protected, or private. This is public, and this is going to allow me to set the document number. And as I look at my source code, does it have parameters? It does. Doc number type in. So I just come back here and do parameter doc number, type of parameter. This is importing. Notice I didn't have to choose that with the constructor because it knew that all of them were importing. It's not passed by value. It's not optional. And the associated data type here is N, no default value, and this is just a document number. And I'll enter, and I'll save. I could do a syntax check, but I'm not going to, and there's that. The big reason why I tell you you're always better off creating it first in the program and then moving into the dictionary is you can just treat this like a checklist, and you don't have to worry about something. You know, if you start with working class, then it just becomes very mechanical, like we're doing here to put this into the class builder. Well, my next method was set date, and it's an instance method. See what just happened there? I started typing instance method, and I'd have to, I got to select that before I can just keep typing. So if you want to choose to type as opposed to hitting the F or the search button, you can. Just make sure nothing gets missed. And this will allow me to set the document date. And I won't jump back to it, but it does in fact have a parameter, and it is a date, which is an importing parameter, and the type associated with this is D, and this is document date, and I will save this. And then I have one more method here, which is display doc, which is an instance method, and it is public, and it allows me to display the document. It has no parameters, so I don't have to click on the parameters button. I will do a check here, and everything is good. So I'll go back to SE80, and you notice now my whole definition has been loaded up. So all that I have left is the implementation. Implementation is the guts of my methods, and this actually is really, really easy. Constructor, I want to set that. Just come up here. There's a few different ways you can get to this, but what I like to do is just come up here to the constructor, double click on it, and it takes me to the code here, and then I can just come here and say, oh, select, Control X for cut, go back to my class builder, paste, and save, and back. Now this is why I had to be careful about using the same variable names and everything else. This couldn't be easier at this point. I'm going to go ahead and highlight this code while I'm here for set doc number. And then I'll come back here, just double click on set doc number, and then paste that in, save and back, and go back to my source code here. Set date is up next. Just highlight that. Go back to set date, double click, boop. And last but not least is display doc. Bless you, double click. Do take the time to align things and such to make this look appropriate, and then we'll save and back, and that's my whole document class now. And I know that because I've been deleting the code as I've been going, and there's nothing left there. So I should be in good shape here, so I'm going to save this. I'll do a validity check, no errors. So I have to activate this. Now watch what happens when I go to activate this. I'm basically having to activate all of the methods as well as other elements of this class. So there's a whole set of things here. Notice it did highlight all of them. If you got to this screen and everything wasn't highlighted, you'd want to click the button here to select all, and then I'll hit the check mark, and it's going to go through and activate all those. It did that pretty quickly, and this guy is now part of the dictionary. Now, if I did this properly, what I can do now is I can actually come down here to my test program, and I can say data my doc type ref2 zn 35 underscore document. Now what I'm going to do here is I'm going to comment out this guy right here, format, comment out lines, and I'm also going to comment out this class definition up here because it's inheriting from something that now technically doesn't exist in the system. So comment these lines out.
Would it work the same for inheritance? Like you would just say redefinition inherit from ZN?
Yep, I could do that. But we'll show you how to do that in the dictionary here in a second. So all I did was just comment out stuff. So literally all I did was change one line. I just changed the object from being the type of a locally created object to something that's in the dictionary. And in fact, now when I run this, ZN document, ZN35 document is not known. ZN35 underscore document. I did activate the object activate. Oh, did I make a typo on my source code? Z? Oh.
When you build it.
Oh, I mistyped it. I did that. Okay, I shouldn't have done that. Make sure you don't do that with yours. And there you go. So in fact, it works just like we expected. Now let's go ahead just as another quick review of this, but then also to show you how we do this with inheritance. All right, so I'm going to take this out from being uncomment lines, and let's do purchasing document. All right, so come back here to the class builder, back out of this. I'm going to fix this and make it ZN35 purchasing document, create purchasing document, untoggle final. All right, now remember, and this is why I always like to treat my program as a checklist, all right, this inheriting from document. where do I put in that this is something that's inheriting? That is all the way here at the left. And you'll notice that there is, if I go all the way to the left, there's a button here called Superclass, which lets me define the parent or define the superclass. I click that button, and it just opened up one additional line here called Superclass, where I can now type this in, which we observed that I misnamed this a moment ago and called it Z35 underscore document. So I'll type that in there and hit enter, and then I'm going to go ahead and save this. And it says that that's saved. I'll do a validity check. Everything there is good. And now at this point, it's pretty much going to proceed in very similar fashion to what we did before, but we are going to see there to be a couple of differences. I'll go to attributes next, and notice my parent attribute got pulled in here, but they're all grayed out. I can't change them. This is just my way of knowing, okay, here are the attributes that you got from your parent class. So that's pretty nice. I have them there to know what's already present. And so now I just have to add to it the new ones. And they are, in fact, vendor ID, which is an instance attribute. It is public. It is read-only, and the vendor ID, I'm looking at my hard copy here, is type C length 2, so I can put the type C in here, but to specify length 2, I'm going to have to hit that button right there. And here's type C length 2. I just add that to it, save, and here's where, and it automatically brought me back. And then this is the vendor ID. And then I have company code, instance attribute, public. Company code is also same as what we did here, so type C, length of 2. Length 2. Save back. And last but not least, delivery date, instance, public, optional, type D, and that's it for my purchasing document. And if I go back to my source code, now we have taken all of these lines right here. Now notice for my methods, I have display doc, redefinition, set doc number, redefinition, and then constructor. So if I go to my class builder and switch to the methods tab, well, there's all my inherited methods. I don't do anything at the moment with the ones that I want to redefine, because really this main screen here is just about parameter passing, and none of the parameters get changed on a redefinition. But my constructor now will have a different interface. So if I go to the constructor line, highlight that, just make sure my cursor's clicked on it, and then hit parameters, there are my parameters that I have inherited. But you notice, you might say, well, I want to change my constructor. I want to add additional parameters here. How do I do that? And so if we go back here, we will notice right here, there's a button called Redefine Method. So if I highlight the constructor row like I am, and I hit the Redefine Method, you cannot redefine the constructor. So that tells me I can't redefine the constructor, so what am I left with? I've got a constructor button again. Remember, they always, for whatever reason, like to handle the constructor as a special case. I click the constructor, Do you want to copy across the signature of the superclass constructor? This is a way of saying basically, do you want to get what was there before and just add more stuff to it? And yes, I do. So I'm going to hit yes. And now there's my constructor method. And if I hit parameters now, you'll notice there's all the old parameters, document number, date, and doc type, which appear exactly as they do here. If I wanted to change any of that, I could, because you'll notice all of those are editable. But all I want to do is add to it here. And specifically, I want to add vendor ID, which is type C, default value of AA. And I'm going to not type in a description just for the sake of time here. And then company code, which is, trying to find things on my sheet here, type C, default CC. And then lastly, delivery date, which is actually just declared as optional type D. So I hit enter for it to update those, and I'll do good here. I'll go ahead and put in my documentation, vendor ID, company code, delivery date, and then I will save, do a validity check just to be sure. Oops, the constructor method must, okay, so now it's complaining about the fact that I haven't written the code for the constructor method, and we'll do that. We just haven't done it at this point. So that's all, whoops, fine and good. Go back in here. So there I see my constructor method. And if I go back here now, I've taken care of all of this. And so now it's just time to work on the guts of the methods. So my first one here is display doc. So now I get to use that button I showed you a moment ago. If I highlight display doc and then hit redefine method, it brings me here. Notice it went ahead and put this in here. You know, do you want to call the display doc method of the parent? And I could just uncomment that, or I can follow the pattern that we've been doing of just taking our old source code and copying it. Oh, I pulled the wrong one, thank you. Display doc is this guy. That would have made for some really weird code. So there we just saw something to be careful about when you're doing this. Okay, so there's our redefinition of display doc. And now if I come over here, now here's my set doc. And find set doc number, hit redefine, paste in my code, save and back. And then last but not least, my constructor. So let us save and activate this purchasing document. Everything's good there. All right, so now I should be able to come down here. Now purchasing document, data type reference to, and I did name this one correctly, ZN35 underscore purchasing document. And boop. Save and, oh, I didn't do a good job cleaning up. And there you go. Works just as we would have expected. Now do notice, although there's absolutely nothing wrong with my program as it's written, since this program now no longer contains class definitions in it, I could get rid of that start of selection statement as it is no longer essential. And you'll see my program runs fine, but it ran fine with it in there as well. Questions about what we just did? Just to kind of hit the highlights here. If we need to define inheritance, that's the tab all the way here to the left, and we just hit the superclass button to define a parent. Attributes and methods. Attributes is normally where we start. Just walk your way across the line. And I think if you think about each of your choices as you go along, it'll be pretty straightforward, and that way you can make sure you don't forget anything. And then methods, the only thing here is, of course, you define the name of the method on this screen, then you hit the parameters button to define the parameters, and then when you're ready to actually define the implementation, you double click on it and it takes you to the source code view. And we have now put 2 classes in the ABAP dictionary.
In the attributes tab, I think I was writing down steps when you put the first one in, but the static attribute, that was num documents was declared under class data.
Class data. Class data here is called the static attribute. And although I don't know that we've written really any of them, we've talked about class methods. A class method here would show up as a choice here, class method. Okay. And there's it's just the constructor gets this little wrench here. It gets that special. I don't know why they did that, but somebody thought that was a good idea. But to me, it just seems to take up space oddly. And the constructor is the one that you handle differently, where you do have a special button for. I can't tell you the number of times I've been like just trying to type the word constructor and do it, and you wind up, it won't let you do it that way. And I remember, oh yeah, there's a button for it up top, and then that will work for you.